Just moments before exposing a $4 million inheritance, I heard an incredible, surprising truth. Jenna's heart raced as she stood before the town hall, beholden to the shreds of her past and the weight of an uncertain future. The room buzzed with voices, some murmuring her name, while others whispered accusations. A fortune lay at her feet, yet it felt like a cursed weight, a noose of obligation tightening around her. Her mind spiraled into the chaos of her dual life. For years, she had balanced the demands of a nurse and a single mother, pouring her energy into the community she adored, while wrestling with the responsibilities of raising Dylan, her teenage son. The idea of indulging in luxury felt foreign, a distant fantasy after years of making ends meet with every paycheck. Now, suddenly, a wealth had landed at her doorstep, and it reeked of shadows she could not ignore. Amid the frenzy, she felt the conflicted pulse of excitement and dread. Memories of her father danced like ghosts, his crooked smile, his endless ambition, but always that chasm of distance between them. Receiving a substantial inheritance would be a shot of adrenaline for her and Dylan. Yet, could she embrace a legacy built on dubious ethics? Every fiber in her being screamed at the injustice her father had perpetrated. "Jenna," a familiar voice interrupted her thoughts, pulling her back to the present. It was Angie, her best friend, worry etching her features. "They're saying it's from David. Do you know what it means for us?" The room shifted, tension coiling like a live wire as eyes turned to Jenna, awaiting her revelation. Every throat felt tight, every breath measured. Before Jenna could formulate a response, the air hummed with escalating murmurs, her father's name now a bitter taste on everyone's tongue. Should she spill the truth of their entangled past, once a tangled thread now fully severed, and reveal that this inheritance didn't just belong to her, but was a haunting echo of the pain her father had inflicted on the town? The pressures of expectations crushed down on her chest like a heavy stone. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. With her thoughts racing, Jenna finally bolted from the back of the room, seeking solace outside, where the gathered townspeople couldn't watch her unravel. Her breath came in sharp, shallow gulps as she leaned against the cool bricks of the building, every thought a tumultuous torrent. Each betrayal burned in her mind. What secrets had her father hidden? Could his illegitimacy not only taint her past, but also ruin the tenuous bonds she had formed with the townspeople? The thick air weighed heavily on her shoulders. Just then, a heartbreaking conversation wafted through the open windows, two friends lamenting about lost jobs and dreams shattered by decisions made years ago without any thought of demographic repercussions. Their words pierced through her, snapping her focus into clarity. The realization struck like lightning. If she unearthed her father's abuses to the community, she wouldn't just expose the wrongs of his past, but perhaps set a fire in others' hearts to rebuild what was lost. But at what cost? Tomorrow, she would stand up in front of that town hall again, to confront not just her father's past, but her own future. As she gazed into her own reflection in a nearby window, Jenna couldn't shake the dread of what would happen next. The truth might shatter everything she held dear, her connection to her friends, and the trust of her community, all on the cusp of blowing apart as she took the stage. The next morning dawned with a heavy fog, enveloping the town in a shroud that mirrored Jenna's own internal uncertainty. She stood in front of the mirror, applying a layer of makeup that felt more like armor than cosmetics. Today, the revelation she had been wrestling with for years would emerge, and the stakes had never been higher. The weight of the inheritance loomed behind her like an unwelcome guest, casting long shadows over the once warm feeling she had for her father. Every brushstroke against her skin reminded her of the battles she faced, not only against the whispers of the town, but against her own perceptions of worth and acceptance. Could she navigate this treacherous terrain without losing herself? Jenna headed to the town hall, each step heavy with expectation. As the building came into view, thoughts tumbled through her mind like leaves in a storm. Would they see her as the daughter of a disgraced man, or would they recognize her as an independent woman capable of forging her own identity despite her father's legacy? With her heart thudding in her chest, Jenna pushed through the door. The atmosphere inside was electric, a charged anticipation that was almost palpable. People filled the chairs, their faces a rich tapestry of curiosity, skepticism, and for some, resentment. She felt their eyes on her, weighing her in the balance, dissecting her loyalties, her motivations. Taking a deep breath, she approached the podium, her hands clammy around the edges. The room quieted, with every murmured conversation reduced to a whisper. It broke her focus for a fleeting moment. The silence felt like a spotlight shining directly on her flaws, her fears. But she pressed on. She would not let this moment slip away. "Thank you for gathering here today," she began, her voice stronger than she felt.
"I know the news of this inheritance has stirred up emotions." The murmurs resumed, but she silenced them with a determined gaze. "It's more than just money. It's a legacy tied to my father's actions that were selfish and frankly destructive to our community." Fear coiled in her gut as she ventured further into uncharted territory. She would not detail every shadow cast by her father's decisions, but would instead focus on what lay ahead. "While I'm grateful for the fortune, I am painfully aware of the consequences it carries. My father's legacy is not mine, and I refuse to inherit his guilt or shame." Jenna could see noses twitch in skepticism, eyes narrowing. This was her moment of truth, and she had to seize it. "My intention is to use this wealth to benefit the community in ways that draw from our collective strength, not diminish it. I want to invest in our schools, help those struggling, and support businesses held back by losses." Her breaths began to calm as the rhythm of her words steadied. The tension in the room shifted slightly. Maybe they were beginning to see the earnestness behind her proclamations. Could she turn this curse into a boon? Just then, an unexpected voice cut through the crowd, the sharpness of it electrifying the air. "And why should we trust you, Jenna? Your father betrayed us. How do we know you won't do the same?" This accusation hung in the air like a dark cloud. The question erupted not just from an individual, but from a group deeply influenced by disappointment. Jenna's mind raced. She could either allow the history of her father to pull her back down, or she could ignite her own narrative, confronting the very core of those doubts. She would not shy away. "You shouldn't trust me blindly, but I ask you to watch and judge my actions. Allow me the chance to help reconcile the past rather than replicate it." With the tension thickening around her and the burden of her father's legacy still fresh, Jenna reached deep within herself for confidence. As she prepared for their response, she realized she stood on the precipice, balanced between reclaiming her narrative and confronting the reality of the community's pain. Tomorrow would hinge not only on her courage, but on the choices she made today. Would she be able to forge a new path for herself and her town? The looming question hung over her as the murmurs faded into a piercing silence. The time had come to face what awaited her after the truth was laid bare. The silence in the room stretched, both a suffocating weight and a glimmer of opportunity. Jenna could feel the ghost of her father's choices, a heavy shroud threatening to smother her dreams before they had even taken flight. But this was her moment. She had earned the right to speak her truth, own her space, and determine her path forward. The eyes of the townsfolk bore into her, a courtroom of judgment, and she found a flicker of resolve burning within. "Today," she continued, "I am not here to relive my father's mistakes. I stand before you as Jenna Thompson, not just as his daughter. My intentions are rooted in change." A ripple of whispers stirred, but she pressed on. "I've had the chance to reflect, truly reflect, on what this legacy means." Images of her late father's arrogance flared in her mind, but they were swiftly followed by a vision of herself, leading initiatives that could foster hope and resilience in her community. "I am ready to use this inheritance not as a shield against scrutiny, but as a tool for transformation." The words flowed from her, hitting her own ears like foreign currency, bold and audacious. She could almost taste the electricity in the air, a shared anticipation beginning to take shape. What had once been a burden could now be a foundation for something greater. Yet as she glanced around the room, Jenna noted skepticism still lacing every face. "Understand this," she said, determination lacing her tone. "I won't promise perfection. I will stumble, but I pledge that every move I make will be transparent. My actions will speak for my intentions. It was more than just a promise. It was a declaration of her emerging identity apart from her father. Could you provide some examples? Another voice called, this one tinged with impatience. How can we be sure you won't repeat the cycle? The challenge brought her pulse quickening again. It was the kind of confrontation she had rehearsed in her mind, yet being embroiled in it felt like standing in the eye of a storm. Streamlining support for local businesses struggling to recover from my father's harmful actions will be my first step. We can develop mentorship programs tailored to our entrepreneurs. Each idea she presented became more than just a proposal. They were pathways to her liberation, fuel for her unfolding journey. The murmurs began to shift. The tension in the air vibrated differently. The question she asked herself was, could she maintain this momentum? Could she guide them and herself toward a future that felt less encumbered by weighty heritage? As the next question arose, a challenge mixed with raw curiosity, the suggestion surfaced in her mind that perhaps these people were not her enemies, but allies wrestling with their own fears tied to the past. They had been betrayed, as had she, and a shared understanding could foster growth. Stealing her breath, Jenna smiled purposefully. I invite you to join me in this journey. Help me craft a more meaningful legacy, built on trust and collaboration, riddled with accountability. Her heart pounded. Would they see her as genuine? This was not merely about her father's actions anymore. This was about creating a new inception linked to forgiveness and rebuilding. As the atmosphere began to shift, a faint flicker of hope ignited within her. Yet the looming specter of judgment still lurked in the shadows, reminding her that trust would not be earned overnight. Would they allow her the space to prove her intent, or would doubt overshadow her best efforts? Before Jenna could formulate her next thought, a hand shot up from the crowd, interrupting her moment. The face of her most vocal critic shone resolutely, and Jenna knew instinctively this was her chance, or a perilous risk. All right, Jenna, the skeptical voice cut through the air. What happens if you fail? The question hung there, audacious and foreboding, challenging her, testing her core. Would she crumble under the weight of expected failure, or would she seize the moment to reassure herself and the community she longed to serve? The answer lay in the next breath she took, a defining moment shaping not just her future, but shaping who she would become. Jenna paused, the weight of the question crashing over her like a tidal wave. Thoughts spun wildly in her mind, a torrent of self-doubt and fierce defiance colliding. What would failure look like? Would it mean returning to anonymity, hushed whispers confirming her father's legacy as immutable? The crowd watched with eyes that scrutinized as keenly as they were curious, an audience poised for both validation and retribution. If I fail, she began slowly, choosing her words with deliberate care, it means I haven't done enough to earn your trust and to repair what has been broken. The honesty resonated, a moment of vulnerability that felt both raw and liberating. A subtle shift occurred within her. She was reclaiming the narrative, not merely responding, but actively defining her role. But, she continued, failure is not an end, it's part of this journey. Each misstep's a chance to learn, to adapt, to grow. I will embrace setbacks and use them as stepping stones. Her eyes scanned the room. It was a gamble, laying out her fears so openly. Would they laugh? Would they see her as naive? The silence stretched, but she held it willingly, not retreating from the arena she had entered. One onlooker, a middle-aged man with an air of authority, leaned forward. You say this, Jenna, but how will you know when you're holding yourself accountable to us? What metrics will you use to track your progress? The challenge was poignant. It was not enough for her to have good intentions. She needed to establish how she would sustain this vision. By involving you, she stated, the formula taking shape in her mind. Let's create a collective of stakeholders from our community, business owners, local leaders, concerned residents. Together, we'll establish benchmarks and hold regular forums to evaluate our successes and failures. Open dialogue will be my greatest ally. Each word solidified her commitment, shifting the narrative towards a collaborative effort instead of a solitary endeavor rooted in isolation. As the murmurs among the townsfolk grew more animated, Jenna felt emboldened by their budding interest. She sensed some skepticism melting away, replaced by intrigue. Could she be the one to mend these frayed connections? Yet she knew this was merely the beginning. The challenge ahead was daunting. Moving past the immediate questions about her plans, Jenna contemplated how she would maintain this newfound momentum. The core of her vision was not just about the projects, but about fostering a community that could trust itself and trust her in return. The weight of those words sank deep within her. She needed a strategy, a plan that highlighted her competence without overshadowing the collaboration she wanted to inspire. Imagine 5 years from now, she spoke again, a new zeal infusing her voice. Our small businesses not only surviving, but thriving. Envision local entrepreneurs stepping into spaces they never dared to dream of, fueled by mentorship and community support. That's the legacy I want to sculpt together, one that honors the past yet boldly charts a new direction. Her fervor was contagious, and she saw heads nodding along with her vision, a faint glimmer of possibility lighting their eyes. But the shadows of doubt remained, lurking just behind their hopeful expressions. Each supportive gesture felt tenuous, teetering on the edge of trust. As she prepared to wrap up her speech, the dread of the unanswered still rippled through her. What if she didn't have all the answers? What if the very act of opening her heart to them only served to embolden her critics? She had laid bare her intentions, but would incompetence silence her? Jenna took another deep breath. Together, we can redefine our future, and I am asking you to take this leap with me. Yet before she could collect her thoughts and move towards closing, another voice framed the uncertainty in the air. It was softer than before, but punctuated with urgency. And what if part of that future reveals more about your father's deeds? A hush fell over the crowd, the question hanging like a dark cloud. A hint of panic clouded Jenna's gut. What truths lay buried beneath the facade of reconciliation? The smile faltered on her lips as she grappled with the unsettling prospect of uncovered secrets. With her heart racing, Jenna wondered if the path to transforming the community would also uncover truths that could shatter not just the vision she held, but the very identity she sought to forge. As the gravity of the situation deepened, the challenge became unmistakably clear. She needed to prepare for revelations that could either galvanize her cause or dismantle it entirely. And amidst that uncertainty, a renewed resolve swelled within her. She had to confront whatever awaited her in the shadows, because this was only the beginning of her story. Jenna stepped off the makeshift stage, feeling the weight of the crowd's gaze pressing down on her shoulders. The vibrant room was filled with a pulsating energy, but uncertainty clouded her. Each whisper among the attendees felt like an invitation to question her resolve.
They were intrigued, yes, but they were also waiting for the next misstep, the next opening for dismissal. In her head, she replayed the moment the question about her father surfaced, its echo still reverberating in her mind. What deep-rooted truths had she inherited alongside the wealth, the legacy? The thought sent a chill through her. Realizing her need to navigate the murky waters of her past, but also her commitment to shape a brighter future, pumped blood through her veins. She had to pivot quickly, gathering herself to ensure that doubts didn't have the opportunity to seed themselves in both her heart and those around her. "Stop thinking about him," she whispered to herself. Her internal mantra transformed into a rallying cry as she moved towards the gathering of hopeful business owners clustered nearby, eager for connection. There was something powerful in allowing her vision to flourish independent of her family's past. She focused on the faces before her, determined, hopeful, sincere. Drawing a few deep breaths, Jenna engaged them, listening intently as each shared their dreams, their fears, and their ideas. In these conversations, she found the missing pieces to her evolving strategy. Each story was a thread, connecting her to entrepreneurs half hidden in the shadows, while simultaneously pulling her farther from her father's imposing legacy. "You tell me your stories, and I'll share my commitment," she stated earnestly. "Together, we can carve out a reality that reflects our aspirations." As the exchanges folded her deeper into their community fabric, Jenna discovered an ember of strength igniting within. Ideas flowed between them, integrating visions into a tangible action plan. What Jenna once deemed insurmountable, creating metrics and evaluating progress, transformed into a communal effort. The collective discussions birthed an accountability structure she hadn't fully conceived alone, yet she radiated confidence. These people were not just mere voices, they were allies in each other's struggles, forging resilient bonds. And it was then, amid the energy and possibilities blooming before her, that she recognized a defining moment.
Creating communal trust wasn't a unilateral effort. It was woven by the threads of their individual contributions. There within that realization lay her flourishing capabilities, the newfound ability to lead through shared strength. The idea that she didn't have to shoulder this journey alone lightened her spirit. Yet, despite this shared momentum, the specter of her father loomed larger. With the merger of their ambitions, Jenna felt the heavy anchor of uncertainty entwining her resolve. Each commendation she received from the group was slowly shadowed by thoughts of potential fallout. What if those navigating this renewed future learned of Barker's secrets? Could a hidden truth undo everything she strove to elevate? Trapped in that tension, leaving the meeting felt like carrying a bag of stones.
She had ignited a spark, but now she had to carry the burden of what lay hidden beneath the surface. The idea of confronting her family's history gnawed at her, urging her to choose between comfort in ignorance or the cold reality of possible revelations. As she left the venue, her mind was a flurry of competing thoughts and feelings, each battling for dominance. Jenna needed to address this moral, emotional dilemma, discover the buried truths, or risk losing everything in pursuit of a future predicated on a shaky foundation. Just when she thought she could navigate the quiet solitude of the night, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She hesitated, but picked it up. An unexpected text blinked on the screen. "We need to talk about your father. Meet me at the old diner at 5. Jenna's heart dropped, bracing for whatever shadows wandering the corners of her life were now demanding to be illuminated. It was time to confront the past, to unearth the truth. Jenna arrived at the old diner feeling a mix of anticipation and dread. The neon lights flickered above, casting an eerie glow on the pavement that mirrored the turmoil inside her. The rhythmic clinking of cutlery and the sizzle of the grill inside distracted her, but couldn't quell the storm of emotions brewing beneath her surface. She stepped inside and immediately spotted a figure sitting in a corner booth, a silhouette familiar yet estranged. "Hey," she greeted, taking the seat opposite him. It was her cousin, Mark, her father's brother's son, a source of comfort and tension all wrapped into one. His face was hard to read, a facade of calm that barely concealed the apprehension swirling within. "We need to talk about your father," he started, his voice steady but low, as if afraid of being overheard. Jenna felt her heart quicken, memories of her father's domineering presence crashing against the walls she had built to forget. "Right," she replied, striving for composure. "What exactly is there to talk about that I don't already know?" Mark leaned closer, lowering his voice further. "You don't understand the extent of it, Jenna. It's not just about the money or the empire he built. There are choices he made, decisions that could change everything for you." "What do you mean?" Jenna's voice was barely a whisper, dread tightening in her chest. Her mind raced with dangerous possibilities, emotions she had chosen to bury now clawing their way to the surface. "It's the reason he stepped back from the business. There were things happening behind closed doors, dark choices he made that could unravel the family legacy. I didn't want to believe it at first, but it's all connected to the money." Each word was a careful stone dropped into the water, rippling Jenna's thoughts as she processed the implications. "Money bought power, Mark. I thought that all it cost was integrity. What are you saying?" Jenna questioned, a tremor weaving through her words. She had spent so much time working to carve her own path away from her father's shadow. Now his mistakes seemed ready to pull her back down. Mark glanced around nervously before leaning in further. "The money, Jenna. It's blood money. There are deals that benefited him at the cost of others. Everything your father built might be founded on lies, on suffering. You need to know this before you make any decisions about the future, or before you stand in front of the community again." A wave of nausea washed over Jenna. She had viewed her father as a flawed guardian of his legacy, not as a potential villain. Could the empire she sought to redefine be entrenched in corruption? She wanted to scream, to reject Mark's words as unfounded accusations, but deep down, an instinct told her that his warning couldn't simply be ignored. "I wanted to help you," Mark continued, his tone softening. "I didn't want you to be blinded by what he left behind. You deserve better than to follow in his footsteps, to be caught up in his web." Jenna felt the heaviness in her chest shift to a fire ignited by determination. She needed the truth.
Facing her father's legacy was no longer a choice. It was a necessity. How do I find out? Who can I trust? As she spoke, her phone buzzed again, this time from her father's estate. The message read, "Your inheritance is ready for your signature." The irony stung more than the truth Mark had just laid bare. "You've already taken the first step," he said, sensing the resolve in her voice. "You just need to dig deeper. I'll help you." The weight of her father's decisions pressed down heavier than ever, but so did the flickers of agency and determination rising within her. Jenna understood she had a choice to make, a defining one that would reshape her identity and her legacy. "Okay," she exhaled slowly. "Let's find out what lies beneath." But just at that moment, the door flew open. A familiar face stepped through, one she never expected to see again. Her father's old associate, a man wrapped in mystery and danger, was now standing before her, eyes locking onto Jenna with a knowing look. The game had changed, and she was already ensnared. Jenna's stomach twisted as she met the gaze of her father's former associate, Victor. His presence alone sent a shockwave through her. This was a man who had been both an ally and a puppet master in her father's machinations. The diner felt smaller, as if the walls themselves were closing in on her. "Jenna," he said with a smooth, unsettling calm that made her skin crawl. "Long time no see." "What are you doing here?" she retorted, a hint of defiance creeping into her voice. She wanted to scream, to push him away, but instead she remained rooted to her seat, the weight of Mark's revelations still pressing heavily on her. "I have information," he replied, his eyes glinting with a predatory interest.
"And it's quite excellent. About your inheritance, about the business." Mark's protective stance beside her only emphasized the tension in the air. "Stay away from her, Victor," he warned, voice firm yet low. "But isn't that the dilemma?" Victor countered, a bemused smile playing on his lips. "What would you give to uncover the truth about what your father really left behind?" Jenna felt the urge to reflexively dismiss his enticing offer, but curiosity clawed at her insides. She had been searching for the truth, gearing up for a confrontation with her father's legacy, yet this was not the source she would have chosen. The air became thick with uncertainty, and it left her torn between her innate distrust of Victor and the gnawing desire for clarity. "What do you know?" Her question felt like a declaration, echoing with determination. Victor leaned closer, the shadows from the dim light accentuating the severity in his expression. "Your father was not just a businessman. He was a player in a much larger game. His empire is built on foundations you can't even imagine. The money he left you, it's not a gift, it's a bind, and you could either uphold a dynasty or tear it down." Anger flared within Jenna. How dare he diminish her father's life's work to verbal tricks and ominous riddles? Yet, as she stared into Victor's sharp eyes, she recalled Mark's warnings about blood money and dark choices. "You're lying," she shot back, though it muffled deep down she wasn't entirely convinced. Victor shrugged, unbothered by her skepticism. "Don't take my word for it. Investigate. I have documents, connections, things that could either fortify your future or shatter it." Mark shifted nervously beside her. "Whatever he's offering, it's not worth the risk, Jenna. Trust him and you'll be pulled into a world you're not ready to face." The words resonated, and yet the itch for knowledge grew unbearable. "What do you want in return?" Jenna's tone was steely, masking the turmoil raging inside. She knew better than to heed Victor's every word, but she sensed that understanding the truth was crucial, no matter how dangerous that path might be. Victor leaned back, arms crossed, a calculated confidence radiating from him. "I want you to understand the cost of the empire. You're standing at a crossroads. Either remain blind and wealthy, or expose the rot at its core. Choose wisely." The weight of his proposition pressed heavily on her. She could cling to the illusion of family and legacy, or veer into the murky depths of the truth that could redefine everything she had fought for. As exhaustion seeped into her bones, Jenna felt the urgency to act. "If you have a lead, I'll listen, but understand this. If I determine you're deceiving me, I'll expose you, no matter what." That smirk returned, teasing at the edges of Victor's lips. "The truth is rarely black and white, Jenna. Be careful what you wish for."
With that, Victor slid a small envelope across the table, alluding to the secrets it held within. Jenna reached for it, her hand trembling slightly as she grasped the cold paper edges. This was a step towards the answers she sought, albeit at the risk of spinning her world further off its axis. Her heart raced at the implications of this crossroads. one that could shatter her notion of who she was and who she wanted to become. As she opened the envelope, Mark leaned in closer, bracing himself for what they might uncover. But before she could pull out its contents, a familiar sound echoed in the diner, the ring of her phone. The caller ID sent a shock through her, her father's attorney. Just like that, the stakes had intensified. Would this be the confirmation she needed to embrace the changes ahead, or a warning that would steer her back into a life of shadows? Jenna's breath hitched as she processed the name flashing on her phone. Her father's attorney was the last person she expected to hear from now, at this crucial juncture. She dismissed Victor's envelope, shoving it into her bag as she steadied herself to answer the call. The weight of her choices loomed large, framing her resolve with uncertainty. "Hello?" she said, her voice trembling between anticipation and fear. "Jenna, I hope I'm not interrupting anything important," came the smooth, practiced tone of Mr. Simmons. His voice was familiar yet distant, invoking memories of her father's meticulous business dealings. "No, it's fine," she replied, gripping the phone tightly. "What do you need?" "We've been trying to reach you about your inheritance. Things have escalated quickly since your father's passing, and I believe it's time to discuss the matter in person." A sharp inhale from him over the phone sent a chill through her. It felt as if he were laying the groundwork for something monumental or catastrophic. "Can't we do this over the phone?" she pressed, her irritation rising alongside her anxiety. "Given the circumstances, I believe a face-to-face meeting would be more appropriate. There are complexities involved that you need to understand fully, regarding the estate and possibly your father's intentions." That single phrase knocked the wind out of her. "My father's intentions?" Jenna echoed, realizing how little she truly knew about the man who had shaped her life and her understanding of legacy. "Yes," Mr. Simmons continued, his tone heavy with something Jenna could not place. "I recommend you come to my office tomorrow. We need to assess your next steps. This isn't something to be taken lightly." "No, it isn't," she replied, her thoughts racing. With every word, her resolve to break away from the shadows of her father's past solidified, yet the fear of what she might discover lingered like a fog. After hanging up, she sat in the diner for a moment, staring blankly at her half-eaten plate of fries.
She felt the gaze of Mark beside her, a silent question lodged in the air between them. "He wants to meet?" Mark finally asked, concern etched across his brow. "Yeah," she muttered, still grappling with the implications of the call. "It sounds serious." "Rightly so. Your father's business was far from straightforward, Jenna," he replied, leaning closer, his posture protective yet open. "Whatever information Victor gave you, it's critical to approach this meeting with caution. You need to be prepared for whatever truths might come to light." There it was again, that pull toward the depths of her family's legacy and everything tied to it. She could feel the veins of doubt and fear intertwining with a rising determination. "I know. I'm done living in ignorance." Mark gave her a slow nod, but she could sense his unease. "Just remember, uncovering family secrets can come at a price. You need to be ready to deal with whatever you find." "I will," she assured him, her heart pounding with a mixture of trepidation and exhilaration. It felt like she was standing at a precipice, with every fiber of her being urging her to leap into the unknown. As they exited the diner, the air outside felt charged, filled with possibilities and danger. Each step felt heavier as she considered Victor's words, and the envelope tucked securely inside her bag. Tomorrow she would confront not only the truth about her inheritance, but about who she wanted to be. "What if my father wanted me to expose these secrets?" she pondered aloud, a decision taking shape in her mind. Was this her moment to begin reshaping her legacy? Without responding, Mark watched her intently, sensing the shift within her. She was no longer the girl caught in the shadows. She was becoming someone ready to fight against the entrapments of her past. As she pulled out the envelope, glancing at it like a treasure map leading into the darkness, the implications rippled through her. The risk was enormous, but was there really any other choice? Before she could dwell too long on the abyss, her phone buzzed again, this time with a text from an unknown number. A single sentence illuminated the screen. "Meet me at sunset. There's more you need to know." The tension tightened in her chest, as a tug of dread and curiosity collided wildly within her. In a moment, her path had become even more convoluted, another layer of complexity in the web of her father's secrets waiting to be unraveled. One thing was clear, she was no longer just standing at a crossroads. She was stepping boldly into a labyrinth crafted by those who had come before. What lay at the center? Would she find freedom or further entanglement in her father's legacy? Jenna awoke to a restless night, her mind racing with images of hidden truths and uncharted paths. The daylight filtered weakly through the curtains, a gray shroud that reflected the uncertainty thick in her chest.
She could feel a storm brewing, both inside and out, and whatever awaited her later that day felt like the eye of it. She took a steadying breath and rose,
knowing that self-assurance was her only armor against whatever lay ahead. In the bathroom, she meticulously applied her makeup, each brushstroke a signal to herself that she was reclaiming her narrative. As she added the final touches, she caught her reflection. The woman looking back was one determined to confront the tumult of her heritage. There was resolve in her eyes, a glimmer of strength she had only begun to unearth. She pressed her lips together, practicing her stance against the tidal wave of revelations she anticipated. Meeting with Mr. Simmons today, she reminded herself aloud, forcing the words out like a mantra. Each repetition settled a layer of anxiety, transforming it into something more tangible, more manageable. She closed her eyes, envisioning the potential outcomes, analyzing the stakes of each. What truths lay buried? Would they empower her, or would they drag her under further into the shadows? As she navigated her way through the cluttered streets toward Simmons' office, Jenna decided to let instinct guide her. The air was dense with fog and uncertainty, mirroring the tumult in her mind. She replayed Mark's warnings, mentally prepping herself for whatever might come from the attorney. "Keep your wits about you," she whispered. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught sight of a couple arguing, their words sharp and filled with unresolved tension. Their conflict echoed her own internal battle, a struggle to assert control over destinies forged by others. When she stepped into the office building, the scent of polished wood and pressed suit fabric washed over her, softening her initial trepidation. She approached the receptionist, identifying herself as she waited for Mr. Simmons. The minutes stretched, each one amplifying the weight of her decision to confront her father's legacy head-on. What was waiting for her beyond those office doors was not merely an inheritance, it was a reckoning with her identity and choices. Finally, she was ushered into the conference room, every step building a tension that braided determination and fear. Mr. Simmons sat behind a large mahogany desk, his expression unreadable, yet his presence heavy. "Thank you for coming, Jenna," he began, gesturing for her to take a seat. "Let's get to it," she said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. "You mentioned complexities. What do I need to know?" Mr. Simmons shuffled papers, eyeing her carefully. "Your father left more than just financial assets. There are elements of his business that, when pieced together, expose a side of him you may not be aware of." His hands hesitated over the paperwork. "Some contracts are tied to questionable dealings, and there are people who might not take kindly to you digging into this." A cold chill ran down Jenna's spine as his words seeped in.
She had thought she was prepared, yet the weight of the implications pressed down harder than she could have imagined. Questionable? What kind of dealings? "It's best to start from the beginning," Simmons replied, handing her a document that looked aged yet pristine. "Your father was involved in partnerships that often skirted legality. Understanding this could very well determine how you want to proceed with your inheritance, and consequently, your future." She took the document, dread pooling in her stomach. This was not what she expected. This was a labyrinth with no clear exit. Yet within that dread, something else flickered, a hint of resolve. Jenna could use this knowledge. If her father's legacy was entangled with shady dealings, she had the power to redefine it. As she leafed through the pages, her mind raced. Maybe this was not just about the inheritance, but about crafting a new foundation, the confidence to reshape her own identity beyond her father's shadow. But before she could spiral further into her thoughts, her phone buzzed in her pocket. "An emergency meeting," it said. "My father's past has consequences, but so does uncovering the truth." Jenna's heart raced at the complexity ahead of her. As she faced Mr. Simmons, there was an undeniable urgency in the air, a tension that promised more than just truths. She was not merely the daughter of a man with a checkered past. She was on the cusp of transforming how she would move forward. "What's your role in all of this? What's the real reason for my father's choices?" she asked boldly, her voice steady despite the storm brewing in her mind. This was just the beginning of knowing, and she would not back down. With that, she felt the air shift in the room, an electric tension signaling that this was merely the first unfurling of deeper, perhaps darker secrets yet to unfold.
Jenna walked away from Mr. Simmons' office, envelope in hand, determination coursing through her veins. The information swirling in her mind felt like a series of intricate puzzle pieces, pieces that could forge a new narrative or shatter everything she had ever known. The weight of her father's legacy pressed heavily on her shoulders, yet with each step she took, the fog of self-doubt began to clear. She knew she needed to use this knowledge wisely. Rather than retreat from the shadows, Jenna envisioned elevating herself to a position of empowerment, a chance not only to reshape her life, but the lives of those in her community bound by her father's actions. She recalled the conversations with local business owners, the fire ignited in her heart when she envisioned investing their futures, not just her own wealth. The decision crystallized within her. She would address the community openly. She had the power to transform her inheritance into a platform for change, challenging everyone to look beyond the taint of betrayal and to invest in each other's dreams became her mantra.
This was her opportunity to create a new legacy, one defined by transparency rather than secrets. Time to take action, she whispered to herself, her resolve solidified. Rallying her thoughts, Jenna activated her phone and typed messages to the business owner she had spoken with earlier, inviting them for a community meeting. Later that evening, the small local cafe bathed in warm light, gleaming with possibilities. Chairs filled, conversations buzzing, as people shifted uneasily, anticipating Jenna's announcement. She stood at the front of the room, a sense of purpose radiating from her. Gone was the girl overshadowed by guilt. Here stood a woman ready to reclaim her journey. "Thank you for gathering tonight," Jenna began, her voice unwavering. "I want to talk about my father and the legacy he left behind, but more importantly, how we can rise above it together." She held their gazes firmly, scanning the room filled with skepticism and interest. "It turns out," she continued, "my father's wealth came entangled with secrets, business practices that hurt many in our community. Rather than turn away from this truth, I understand our chance to face it head on." A ripple of murmurs danced throughout the cafe, eyes widening as the residents processed her words. "I believe I can reshape this narrative, and I want you all here with me," she asserted, her palm resting against the table for balance. "No more hiding. This is our community, and together we can rebuild trust and ensure accountability." Jenna felt their apprehension shift, a hesitant spark igniting curiosity. She detailed her plans, underlining her commitment to include everyone in the process. Mentorship programs, partnerships with local businesses to restore functionality to their operations, and a funding initiative that aligned with the true desires of the community. "This is not just about me or the past," she proclaimed, a fire lighting her eyes. "It's about us. We have the chance to cultivate a legacy defined by collaboration and accountability. Just because my father's choices brought pain doesn't mean I will follow in those misguided footsteps." There were nodding heads now. The atmosphere began to lighten. A middle-aged woman spoke up. "What guarantees do we have that you'll stay true to your word?" "I can't promise perfection," Jenna admitted, "but what I can promise is transparency. I'm inviting you to hold me accountable at each step. We must decide together how to document our progress and measure our contributions." The room was in motion, energy shifting, hope flooding in where there had once been doubt. Some began to offer suggestions on how to establish the necessary structures, the very foundations that would ensure Jenna's newfound commitment wasn't a fleeting gesture, but a robust, sustainable effort. Weeks passed, and the actions Jenna implemented unfolded like a blossoming flower. The business community responded fervently, re-engaging with the local economy. Before long, mentorship programs flourished, and collaborative projects stimulated growth and revitalization. Reports of progress traveled through town like wildfire. Eventually, nearly a year from that pivotal moment at the town hall, Jenna stood at a newly established small business fair, watching entrepreneurs unveil their hard work. Gratitude swelled within her. She saw their smiles, felt their pride, and marveled at their courage, actions driven by a united determination. Jenna engaged with each vendor, soaking in stories that inspired her to make the right choices in the face of her legacy. "I'm so proud of you," she would say, knowing the trust they had built together was impenetrable, forged from shared pain and collective resolve. Just as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and crimson, a familiar figure wandered into view. Mark, her cousin. He approached, beaming with pride. "You've done it, Jenna," he said, enveloping her in a congratulatory hug. He gestured to the bustling fair,
passion evident in his voice. This is your legacy, one earned through perseverance. With each word exchanged, Jenna felt a profound sense of closure, a connection to her father as she stood among the fruits of her labor. She embraced the painful reality of her father's choices, while simultaneously stepping outside that shadow, crafting her narrative. "I can finally be free," she whispered, her heart swelling with solid confidence. She had proven to herself and her community that breaking free from one's past was not only achievable, it was her birthright. As she gazed over the fair, a sense of belonging enveloped her. She had surpassed not just the weight of inheritance, but had achieved fulfillment. Her heart echoed the promise of a brighter tomorrow, a legacy rich with hope, transparency, and renewed trust. The journey had defined Jenna Thompson in untold ways, culminating in a brand new identity independent of blood ties, forever anchored in purpose. If you've resonated with Jenna's transformative journey and want more exclusive stories of personal empowerment, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Smash that like button right now to feed the algorithm and give Jenna the recognition she deserves. We want to hear your reactions and theories about her journey. Comment below. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this inspiring conclusion. Together, let's celebrate empowerment and rebirth.